Today we'll be making brownies as per the recipe on King Arthur Baking's website. I've looked at a lot of different recipes and I feel this is a good one compared to others. I mean, brownies are a very simple thing to put together. I thought it would be interesting to do some of the steps in stop motion as well, but we'll see exactly how much of that I do. Hopefully this comes together pretty quick. First of all, you're going to want a clean surface. Recipes will say that you should start by preheating the oven, but I don't want to waste heat, so I'll wait to do that till partway through. You're going to need a large mixing bowl, and then you can start getting your ingredients together. And for that, I also like to have one of these volumetric measuring things for liquids. So then we can start working on the ingredients. So here are all the ingredients we're going to be using. We're going to be using eggs, we're going to be using oil, we're going to be using cocoa powder. It can be Dutched if you want. In this case, it's not. We can be using some vanilla, some butter, which happens to be salted, which means we can reduce the amount of salt we put in by about 1/8 of a teaspoon, I believe. And then we're going to be using some sugar and some flour. And then also some espresso powder, which I'm going to grind from actual coffee bean. So I'll go ahead and get that real quick. But yeah, I should also mention that the butter, it's supposed to be added melted and then cooled. So I'll sort of do that as the first step here. And we could do it on a lower power level setting, but I'm literally just going to run it for till it's like half solid or like a quarter solid, then it can mix in its own heat and fully melt while still being not too hot. Meanwhile, I can go ahead and measure out some of the cocoa, as that's the first ingredient it mentions. Order shouldn't really matter. You can mix everything together, dry and wet, doesn't have to be separate. Brownies are very simple. We'll call that 3/4 of a cup of cocoa powder, and it looks like our butter is done being melted. We can give it a little time to cool, a little warmer than I would have liked, but again, it really doesn't matter too much. Next, we're going to want to add half a teaspoon of salt, but in this case, since we already have salted butter, we're subtracting 1/8 of a teaspoon, so that comes out to 3/8 of a teaspoon, which I'll just do as a heaping or like rounded 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Now for brownies, a fork is totally acceptable, but I'll be using a whisk for this case. And next I'm going to go ahead and add the butter. Now this is looking a little dry, so I guess I can add some eggs and oil. I guess I'll do the oil first. Next we can move on to the cracking and addition of the eggs. I'm not sure if I mentioned, but we only did 1/4 cup of oil. Now I'll add the vanilla. Next, I ground up some espresso powder. By the way, that was only about 1 teaspoon of vanilla. So I'll add around 1 teaspoon of espresso powder. Next I'll mix that up and then finally add the flour. So we may as well set the oven to preheat now too. At this point I'm going to switch to stirring with a fork and add the flour. It should be 1 cup. So when you mix it, you probably don't want to overwork it or the gluten might develop. And then also, we're going to be greasing the pan, not using oil or a spray, but using a little butter because then it crisps up pretty nicely. And I'm just going to be reusing the wax paper that the butter that I added earlier came in order to applicate that to this. This is a very good brand of container. Let me see what it says. It literally says USA Pan. When it comes to pouring it into the pan, we're going to use a spatula. Next, we want to set the timer for 30 or 40 minutes and put it in the oven. And that should do it. You can clean up the mess we made and put away the ingredients we got out, and then come back and check it when it's done baking, when it says it's done baking at least. Make sure that it looks right, and then also dip in a toothpick or maybe a fork and make sure that when you pull it out, it doesn't pull out too much wet crumbage. If it's dry crumbage, it's probably fine and it'll finish cooking in its own heat. Otherwise, it might need to cook it a little longer. You can always cook it longer. You can never go back and unburn it if that's something you've done. But brownies are pretty hard to mess up. I don't think I ever have really. Biggest concern would be adding too much salt, but I tried a little bit of the batter and it tastes fine to me. So we'll take a look at the finished product in 35 minutes here, or maybe a little longer. Here's the finished product of the brownies. Just need to cut it up and put some on a plate. Well, I just tried some. I'd say it turned out just about precisely right. I suppose you could cook it a little bit longer if you wanted to get it a little bit chewier. But this is pretty much exactly what I'm going for. And you can always vary the amount of eggs as well. 3 is kind of, seems like a lot, so it yields a cakier brownie. Again, if you want them to be chewier, you can put in fewer eggs. And that's all.